If you search now on Google on your phone for something, quite often the top thing you get is an AI answer.
Yep.
And that's generated by Gemini, which is Google's AI engine. And sometimes it's completely wrong. And that's scary because people that don't understand, let's say your average, I don't want to be ageist here, but an older person who doesn't really know much about AI, but has a phone. Before, like you say, when you Google something, you would get a web page and it would be pretty accurate in terms of what you're looking for and you could read into it. But when you search now, sometimes the answer of a Gemini is completely wrong. I asked it a really easy question. Who's the top scorer of all time for Nottingham Forest? That's one of my favourite football teams. It got the answer wrong, right? What if it's something serious? Like if you need some medical advice or something like that, and you've asked it there, and it tells you the wrong thing.
Welcome to a new episode of the eMobility Marketing Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Barry Henderson, our copywriter at Nexxt Industry, who works daily on turning complex eMobility and B2B stories into clear, effective messaging. Barry, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Theo. Thanks for having me.
I've been looking forward to having this conversation with you about AI. So AI made writing accessible to everyone. You don't need a copywriter anymore, but somehow most of copy feels more generic than ever. Why is that?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think we've seen the volume of copy has definitely gone up so much, obviously, but yeah, you're right. It has become more generic. What's happened is I think the baseline has risen, but now sort of bad copy that we used to see as kind of non-existent. There's become a kind of a beigification, I call it, where everything, as you say, is kind of generic. Everything looks clean and structured and grammatically correct, but unfortunately completely forgettable sometimes. So I think bad copy, as I say, has kind of gone, but great copy hasn't become more common. If anything, it's become more rare.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of copy is the same. You can see it on LinkedIn, for example, a lot of messages with the same structure, like everything's identical, and it doesn't really stand out. So if you have something to say, like, yeah, this kind of generic content doesn't really work well, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, AI literally works by predicting the next most likely word, based on patterns that it's already seen. So by its very nature, copy inside any industry starts drifting towards the same kind of language, the same phrases, the same kind of safe ideas, so it's become this almost like what they call the race to the middle, what happened to the race to the top.
Yeah, exactly.
And but what that does do, it creates a bigger gap between companies that really know what they want to say and the others that just are producing this kind of generic stuff. So the flood of AI content actually means now that the human-led kind of unique content that's out there stands out more, and if anything has become more valuable than it was before in a way.
I also tried a lot writing with AI and also came to the conclusion that, what I'm doing now is I write it myself and then I have AI, actually both ChatGPT and Claude, review it and help me make it better. But it's my writing, it's my voice. And I think that makes a big difference. Before I also had some really generic content and it also feels like that. If you look at it, like a lot of people share the same stuff and you can make a big difference if you make it more personal. And that's also where the value of a writer like yourself still comes in, right? But we'll talk about that in a moment. So Barry, you've been working with us for a while, writing quite a lot of complex, kind of converting complex technology into clear stories. Can you tell me a little bit more about yourself and tell the audience a bit about where you came from, what's your background, and what are you doing today?
Yeah, sure. So when I first got into writing, it was more kind of freelance journalism. I was doing sports journalism. There's a lot of stuff out there, Sportskeeda, that I've written about Premier League football and golf over the years. And that was how my first foray into writing. I did a literature degree, so I've always kind of had that background. But when I first got into what I was teaching, I spent a lot of time teaching in Hong Kong and in South Korea. And that was my job for over 10 years, actually. And all the time I was on the side, sometimes for not much money at all, just a hobby, I was writing. And when I first came back to London, which was like 2022, then I kind of got more into the copywriting side of it. And that was before AI had come around. So I kind of experienced writing as a copywriter before AI and since. it's been so rapid, the kind of the AI revolution. It seems like it's been around forever, but it's only actually been, 3 years that it's been being
Yeah.
used. And yeah, so it's interesting because when I was first writing, one of the first jobs I had as a copywriter was writing in the financial industry, and we had to write 3 articles a day, otherwise we wouldn't get paid.
Hmm.
And that's so three between 800 and 1,000 word articles. And there was no AI then. So when I think back to that, it was an incredible sort of boot camp almost for copywriting for me, because it made me get really quick, but also you have to be accurate, obviously. It really sharpened my skills. You could use Google, right, in those days, but you couldn't plagiarize anything. They actually put it for plagiarized checker before it got published. And if you plagiarized, you'd be in trouble,
Okay. Yeah.
I think that experience for me really, really helped me as a writer, because I think I was always a good writer, but I wasn't particularly fast. I used to really take my time because I was freelance, so I could do it in my spare time. So that job, in a way, really prepared me for now, because we need to, obviously we do use AI, but we can't just use it completely. We still need that human touch. So it's made me, AI's helped me to create the sort of scaffolding of the work, but now I can use that extra time to just give it that human touch and, really make it resonate with people that read it.
I wonder, Barry, like hearing you speak, like how do copywriters these days learn the skill? I mean, at
Mm,
the time, what you mentioned, that was a good learning, right? And but
yeah.
today with AI, like they instantly, like they grew up with AI now. And so how do you learn the skill of copywriting and how is that changing? And obviously, I can understand it's going to be different than it was at the time, but still, you need to have that skill and understand how you write things, like how you get the best story out. How do you think that's happening now with people getting out of school and
Yeah.
learning the skill of copywriting, or doesn't it exist anymore? What do you think?
That's a really good point, and it's actually quite a scary thought, to be honest. Because imagine the new generation of writers now. Like you say, they don't know the pain of having to really create something completely yourself, and they also don't know the rewards, because it's very rewarding when you make something yourself. I used to read those old articles back when they got published, right? I know it sounds a bit narcissistic, but I would read through. I was so proud when I had stuff published, and I would sit there and read it back after writing 3 articles a day sometimes, and oh, that was a really good line. Wow, I'm proud of that. Sometimes it'd be the opposite. You'd be like, oh, I can't believe I put that. That was stupid or something. Yeah, to not have that. I mean, I actually find that quite strange and dystopian, that there are people now that they will never know the kind of the reward of creating something completely from your own mind. And I think that's so important, because I really believe that everybody's creative in some way, whether it's
Hmm.
writing or painting or singing or whatever it is. Even music now, people make it with AI, right? So yeah, I think it's an interesting thing, but I guess for new writers coming in now, it's going to be about, because you still have to be able to write the correct prompt. AI is only as good as what you tell it to do. So I guess I guess the skill now is being more of a strategist and like really working out what it is you want. But yeah, I do think that's a worrying trend.
Do you think that the skill of copywriting is losing its magic?
Yeah, I mean, it does feel like that, doesn't it? It feels like that in a lot of ways, because the reason I got into writing was because I loved it. For me, it was a creative outlet, and it was so rewarding to me. So it's very important to not lose that, because if AI is just doing everything for you, I mean, that's kind of depressing. And I must admit now that, like, in some ways, sometimes it's made me lose confidence, especially when it first came out. I'm getting better right now because I'm more used to it. But let's say, for example, you want to create a headline for a piece. That was always a really fun thing to do. Create a cool headline that really encapsulates it and makes the reader want to read it. Any writer now, I must admit, if I write a headline for something, I'll put it through ChatGPT and go, like, I'll sort of say, what do you think of this? And ChatGPT will probably change it, even if it was really good, because it wants to appease you. It wants to answer you. It wants you to think it doesn't just want to say, yeah, that's great. Right. So even you might put some of your best writing through AI and it might change it, and that can damage confidence as well. But yeah, in terms of losing the magic, what I've learned to do is, okay, AI, I use it as like the world's best research assistant. Okay. It's brilliant for research, but I'm still the editor. I'm still in control of this project. I'm the soul of this project. Okay. And that's important. If you remember that, then it's still you, and then you're not losing the magic. You're still, in a way, you can use it to be even more magical, because the AI is doing the donkey work, kind of the boring stuff. Although that stuff I do think is important in some ways. And now you can just concentrate on sprinkling that magic over it. So I guess we have to move with the times to not use it. Like, people could say, when Google first came out, right? People could say, "Oh, do you think that libraries have lost their magic because you don't go to a library anymore, and you don't has reading lost its magic? You don't have to research anymore." But imagine now telling someone that they can't Google something when they want to know something, right? They'd be like, "You're insane. You have to use Google." And almost in a way, I think that's overlooked, actually, just how much of a brilliant search engine AI is. When you think about it, if you want to know something, you don't have to search for hours on Google trying to find it. You can just put it into ChatGPT or Grok or whatever you're using, the specific thing that you're looking for, and it will find it quickly. So I do, on your point, when you look at it on face value, it has lost its magic, but I guess we have to move with the times, and there's still magic there. Writing is still magical. Creating great copy, there's still a magic to it, and I still get a buzz from it. So
Yeah,
it's not
but
dead
like you
yet.
said, Barry, like I'm happy to see you so positive and enthusiastic. But it's like that, right? You're in control. You're the editor. You're writing that piece. You're responsible, and you're using AI for your research to set up the structure, to come up with a first version, maybe. But then it's also up to you to make it better, to make it less generic. And I think that comes back to the point we discussed before. Like a lot of this content of these first versions, at least, are very generic,
Mm.
and you'll need to revise it and go back and forth. And I've been, like, for example, for some social media posts, going back and forth between Claude and ChatGPT. So I written it, then I put it into Claude, it made some changes, and I asked ChatGPT, like, hey, give me a review. It gave me some feedback. I made some changes. I went back to
Yeah,
Claude. Like, doing it that way, you really get some proper advice, but you also prevent that it's going to be generic and written
yeah,
like every other piece of content out there created with AI. And I think using it that way, which I can totally imagine that you're working in a similar way, but we'll get into that in a moment. But then it becomes actually valuable. Yeah, you can do so much more, and you get so much more input. So in the end, that's also going to improve your content. The only risk that I see, and I'm really looking forward to hear what you think about that, is that you're also depending on AI. So if you do research on a specific topic, you're really depending on what the AI tells you it is about and what it provides. Well, for example, if you want to learn about something, before you would go to Google, you'll get 3, 4 results, you look into that, and then you make up your mind yourself.
yeah.
And now AI kind of decides it for you, right? It gives you one answer and that's it. And yeah, that's also risky when creating content, I can imagine.
It's very risky. Do you know, that's a really interesting point, because how quickly we've come to just trust AI, like, which, oh, it's
Yeah.
just awful,
Oh, yeah.
that's quite scary. And I've seen, like, it can make the most basic mistakes. Even like if you try um, using ChatGPT to convert miles to kilometers, believe it or not, it can't do that. It gets it wrong. It's like, how can it get that wrong? It's the most obvious piece of mathematics that computers have been doing for over 100 years, right? That's bizarre. And what I actually find really actually quite terrifying is, I don't know if you've noticed this, but if you search now on Google on your phone for something, quite often the top thing you get is an AI answer. And that's generated by Gemini, which is Google's AI engine. And sometimes it's completely wrong. And that's scary, because people that don't understand, let's say your average, I don't want to be ageist here, but an older person who doesn't really know much about AI, but has a phone, before, like you say, when you Google something, you would get a web page, and it would be pretty accurate in terms of what you're looking for, and you could read into it. But when you search now, sometimes the answer of a Gemini is completely wrong. We did some tests on it. For example, we were doing it the other day. I asked it a really easy question: who's the top scorer of all time for Nottingham Forest? That's one of my favourite football teams. It got the answer wrong, right?
Really?
That's one example. But what if it's something serious? Like, if you need some medical advice or something like that, and you've asked
Hmm.
it there, and it tells you the wrong thing. That's very strange. But so I think people really need to realize that what AI is, it's not the gospel. It's not the truth always. It's using information that it gets online. Yeah, I think it's improving a lot. I think it is more trustworthy. But I think what you said, if you're using AI to, for example, put it from one into another, is very good. So if you have something in ChatGPT and put it through Grok, that helps get rid of mistakes because I actually find that Grok is more accurate when researching. It's not as good at creating interesting copy, but it's better at researching. So I use Grok when I want to research something and get more accurate information.
So Barry, if like a company would say to you like we don't need a copywriter anymore, we use AI, what would you tell them?
Yeah, that's a good one. There's quite a common analogy that I've heard a few times recently, and that's like saying, "Why do I need a chef? I've got a microwave."
Okay, fair.
It's quite a cool one I've heard, but it's a good analogy. You know, which restaurant do you want to eat in? The one that just warms up slop, or the one that has a human chef that prepares great food? There's another analogy I thought of like that. It would be like saying, you know, why do I need someone to tell me a story who's experienced it when I can just have a Bluetooth speaker by the campfire telling the stories? You know, I want the real experience. I want the real human, you know. I mean, if your goal is to sound like everyone else, then AI is perfect, you know. But I mean, the thing is, AI excels at execution. Like we said, it's great at research, but there's a lot of things that it can't do. What about like new trends, things that are happening in real time, right? AI doesn't pick up on those. AI only gets stuff when it's gone around Google quite a few
Mm.
times. It's become very trending, you know. But you know, up to the minute stuff. If you want to sound like really like something that's going on in the news today or more recently, or new shifts, there was a big shift in eMobility that which we work in, where people kind of moved on from the kind of the eco-friendly talk to more actual, more utilization of what people actually need. But AI was still churning out the kind of like the environmental stuff. That,
Okay, yeah.
that was a big moment, sort of last year, or maybe at the start of last year, where you could tell people using AI because they were still being very green, eco-friendly in their language. Not there's anything wrong with that, but it was almost like that was the stuff that AI was still doing. So it doesn't catch up. So it's behind the times with trends as well. But
Yeah,
I
makes
think,
sense.
yeah, I think choosing AI instead of humans. Listen, the best companies are the ones that are using AI with great humans. So,
Exactly.
you know, the ones that really know how to use it. But you still need the humans because, I mean, people now are much more adept at telling when something is written by AI. You know, everyone can see it now. And so, you know, if I'm reading something from your company and you haven't even bothered to put any real conviction and unique kind of information in there that grabs me, like why would I be bothered to buy your product really? It's a turn off. So for that human touch, that human soul, you know, that can't be replaced, you know. Like I would say we've been working with Clover, the e-bike startup in Valencia. When we were writing the copy for them, their CEO, Scott Murphy, specifically said to us, I don't want it to sound like AI, right? It needs to sound funny, right? I want it to be funny. And I'll tell you what, that's one thing that AI can't do. It can't be really
You're
funny.
right. Yeah, there's not much humor in what it creates.
It
No.
could tell you, it could tell you a good knock knock joke or like a dad
Mm.
joke. Do you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
like, is it going to be edgy? Is it going to be really funny? And you know, is it going to make people sort of sit back and go, "Wow"? No. And so for Clover, I really enjoyed creating their copy because I didn't use really AI at all because there wasn't really too much technicality with it. It's just bikes, great bikes, I might add. It was um, it was more about the soul and the humor and the freedom and the emotion and all that stuff. Try writing that on AI. I mean, to the untrained eye, you'd be like, oh, that's nice, but really, it's not.
Hmm.
It's not getting to the point, and you know, Clover's ad campaigns on Meta have been very successful. They've had a lot of engagement, and it's because they're funny and they're edgy and they're clearly not AI.
It's all about being human, right? Like having a
Yeah.
conversation one on one. That's how you want to communicate with your clients, with your prospects, with everyone around you. And it's
Mm.
like you said, AI doesn't really get the emotion. It doesn't bring the emotion into the text as well.
Mm.
And if you look at the future, Barry, like I've been intrigued. Like I think it was about 2 years ago, we spoke with a company in eMobility about offering our services, and they didn't move forward with that. And then after that, I saw a lot of content on LinkedIn specifically that was clearly created with ChatGPT. And now I'm talking about 2 years ago. So all these emojis, and it was really terrible, like so unprofessional. And they just kept doing it. They had no clue that this was not the kind of content you need to build authority and to really
Yeah.
be a professional be a professional company. But today, if you look at how AI creates content and text, like it's so much better than it was 2 years ago. And I know in terms of AI, 2 years is like the Stone Age, like 100 years ago, or like longer. So imagine a year from now, like how do you feel where this evolves into? Like a year from now, maybe it does understand the emotion, and maybe all the things we talked about, it will do for you. Like, would that even be possible? Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. It's really hard to predict, isn't it, where it's going? I listened to a podcast recently, and it was actually from 3 years ago, and they was predicting the future, and no one predicted AI as we know it. They predicted AI as being they were going to have robots or something, but no one predicted these LLMs that we have and how much they're going to affect the world. In terms of predicting how it's going to go, it's so hard to say, isn't it? Because you know is there a ceiling? I mean, probably not. I mean, it's going to be more and more kind of ingrained in our lives. As you say, it's changing so rapidly. I suppose you would imagine that the more intelligent it gets and the more it is studying all the copy that's out there, I guess maybe it will be better at emotion, but yeah, I don't know. I think maybe the next step is actually AI sort of intertwining with human bodies and human brains, and
Yeah.
actually becoming like a part of us. So we're actually thinking with it. And when we actually start thinking with it in like symbiosis, then maybe it will make people funnier and make people more interesting.
It could be, yeah. It was interesting actually. Like I spoke with my accountant here in Curacao yesterday about AI. Like he started talking about how that affected their business because if you're doing bookkeeping, like that's not needed anymore. Like even today, but especially like in maybe a year from now or so, you can just tell the LLM to keep track of your books and all of that. But that so he had a clear opinion about that. But he also said like, yeah, I really think there's a ceiling because we've seen the same with virtual reality, for example. Like you might remember 2 years ago or so, or 3 years ago, we all talked about the metaverse and how Meta was investing billions in the metaverse. And where are we today? Nobody's using it, right? Well, maybe some geeks that really like it, but it hasn't been really taking off. And he said like, I think the same with AI. But I told him like, AI is more tangible, it's more practical. It helps people today with so many things. So that'll always be there and it gets better and better over time. So I don't believe we've hit that ceiling. Like it's going to take a long time. There's so much more that it can do and it's learning every day. But that's purely my opinion. If I look at how I'm using it personally, like in my day-to-day work, it's my assistant. Like I'm using it all day for a lot of things. And in the end, I add the human touch because it helps me. It's my assistant. That's how I look at it. It doesn't do a lot of work for me, but it helps me get proper insights, get drafts for things, like think about propositions, about, do the research for me. But even with research, and you mentioned that as well, I also do my own research. So it's great to get the input from the AI, but it's also important to think about it yourself because there's a level of information that the AI doesn't get to. And it's like you said, what's happening at the moment in the market, it doesn't really know that. It doesn't keep track of conversations that you're having with others in the space, and especially in the e-mobility industry that we're in. It's important to keep track of what's happening and the recent things that are moving the market. And I see a lot that AI comes back with information that I think, but this was a year ago or was a couple of months ago, then it might have been relevant. But today, a lot of things already changed. That's really important to keep that in mind. And I can imagine, especially being a writer, like, yeah, you want to make sure you're right about what's happening today and not what happened a year ago. That's where it becomes tricky to use AI.
Yeah, that's a good point. And perhaps that answers your previous question. That's where it's going to improve. It's going to get more up to date and not be so
Mm-hmm.
generic and not be kind of behind the times. Maybe it will be able to sort of, read the news more because, at the moment it doesn't really read up to the minute news. It only reads stuff that people write about the news, if that makes sense. So it's not got its finger on the pulse, has it? And if and you can sound behind the times, as we said, if you're using it. So perhaps that's where it's going to improve. Perhaps it's going to be much more sort of self-aware in real time, and that would then at that point, then copywriters maybe are going to be in trouble because it's going to be able to do everything. But no, it's interesting, like going back to what you said before about where's it going to go. Like, there's a really interesting point by a guy called Tim Urban. I don't know if you're aware of him. I absolutely love him. He's brilliant. He writes a thing called Wait But Why, which is just a blog space that he has online. And he was saying about technology, like every generation thinks that they're the peak of technology. Imagine like when the first photograph was taken, that was in like the mid 19th century. Everyone was like, "Oh my God, this is it. We've peaked. This is like the devil's work. What is this insanity?" And that obviously now is so old now. And so it's really, and we think that now we're using AI and we're kind of thinking this is peak technology. This is crazy. We don't even have to think for ourselves, but we have no idea what's around the corner, though, do we really? And he kind of points out that if you look at any period of time longer than like 10 years, the actual advancement of technology is exponential. It doesn't just improve, it's exponential, which is insane. So it's like if you look at the 20th century, in 1902, the Wright brothers, I think it was 1902 or 1912, no, 1902, the Wright brothers did the first ever flight. That was the first half of the century. Look at the second half of the century, we were on the moon. How fast that came. Or if you look at the later half of the 20th century, in the later half, in the last 25 years, the internet was invented compared to like the first half. Like that's exponential from what happened in that first part of the second half. So what's going to happen in the next 50 years? Look what's happened since the start of this century. If you imagine what it's going to be like for the next 25 years, our brains can't really handle it. But, the great thing is that, we're here for the ride and it's fun. It's like a movie. What's going to happen next in the next scene, and we just have to ride with it. And I think that the important thing is, I must admit, when I first started using AI to write stuff, there was a bit of a weird process for me where I really didn't like it. It was like almost like a grieving process for my old ways, even like where I had to research stuff and put in the groundwork and really create. But now I've adapted, and now I see that there still is so much room for being creative, and there really is. And in fact, it makes being creative more fun because the hard work is done for me. I can so if say one of our clients, I can do the research stuff. Like some of our clients have quite sort of technical products that use technical software. It might be quite hard for me to understand completely by myself. I can research that with AI, and then I can write about it using my own brain and my own soul without doing all the kind of the technical research. So I think the important thing is, no matter what the future brings, it's still going to be human centric. Because at the end of the day, we're the ones who have to use it. So we're not going to design it in a way that completely alienates us, hopefully.
No, absolutely. And I agree, like the room for creativity is always going to be there. And that's also where a human is needed. I wanted to say, like, you do a lot of expert interviews with our clients to get the information from the person that's actually working on it. Like, that is something that could not be replaced with AI, at least not at this moment. I can see that AI might be able to do an interview with someone in the future and then process that data, but you still need that input from that human, right? So not everything can be found online. Not everything can be researched by AI. How do you look at that? Like, what would the future look like in that sense?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, like you say, you can do an interview and just transcribe it and put it in AI, but in terms of asking the right questions, if I was doing this interview with you now and it wasn't you, it was just an AI machine, that would not be good for me. It would not be good for the final product of the article. And yeah, that's a good example of where the human touch is definitely needed. I mean, you can use AI to summarize the interview for you and help you. But in terms of creating the interview and asking the questions, we're still a long way from that. But like we say, who knows in 2 years' time or even less, maybe we'll have a really good interview tool. But I certainly wouldn't want to be interviewed by a bot. You know, it's like if you use those. How annoying is it? This is a good point, actually, right? You know, if you want to ask something, like there's something's you're trying to use a company help desk, and you get the chat bot. When I get that, I just write straight away, "Give me a human."
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Please give me a human. I don't want to talk to you because you're just giving me this. And so, in a way, that shows that technology still feels quite dated when I
Yeah.
use that.
And actually, Barry, when that happens, I usually already know the answers it's going to provide. I already found those. So I just want to talk to someone that knows more than that chatbot, right? And that's, yeah,
Yeah,
I feel exactly the same.
that's why you're there. You wouldn't be asking it if you hadn't researched the obvious stuff in the first place, would
Yeah.
you? Now you've got to the point where you need to speak to someone.
Yeah,
It's
exactly. Yeah.
infuriating. It's infuriating when you get that.
I think honestly, it's one of the things with that companies don't always understand that, as soon as a client reaches out and has a problem, they already did their research with AI. So the LLM has already researched the topic and
Yeah.
somehow they got stuck. They don't know what to do. So they need to talk to a human person who knows more than the AI has found. And I think that's where a lot of these processes go wrong, because then you have a nice AI chatbot. You already have all that information, so you just want to talk to someone, and that's a change we need to make as well. And that someone should not be an AI on the other end pretending to be a person. So you want to talk to an actual person, and that can help you solve that problem. And I think that's also where it goes wrong a lot of times. Like some companies are very advanced with this, and you just don't get the answer that you need, and that's really frustrating. And they're losing clients because of that.
Yeah, there's been a big story in the UK last week that the doctor's surgeries, the GP surgeries, now when you phone up, you get an AI bot talking to you. You know, I don't know if you've ever experienced that. You get that when you book restaurants in London now a lot.
Okay.
It sounds really human, so it's quite spooky because the voice is like, "Hi, George speaking," or something. It actually gives itself a name, so you think it's human, but you can sort of like, this doesn't sound right, and then you realise pretty quickly this AI, and it's been a bit of a nightmare here for the NHS because people have been getting refused appointments by the bot on the end of the line.
Really?
That's where it's bad because these are people that maybe vulnerable people, maybe people who are not as technology savvy, trying to book a doctor's appointment. So this is where companies are going wrong, like going back to our industry. The biggest mistake companies make, right, is when they rely on AI too much. They're using it as a full replacement instead of
Yeah.
a
100%.
co-pilot. It should be a powerful co-pilot then it's great. But don't let it take over. Don't let it do everything because then it just becomes soulless and that's not good. But it's easy to see why companies do it because it's easy to slip into that trap. It seems like a great way to go, but that's overusing it and you need to get the balance. I think the balance is super important. And that's what the best companies are doing, the most successful companies are doing, is they're using AI like I said, I use it for a scaffolding of my work. I don't use it for the important parts because then it's just going to be boring as hell and no one's going to get to the bottom of what you're writing.
No, absolutely. It's actually interesting. Last week I listened to a podcast where they were interviewing the CEO of a big media company and or a creative. Well, yeah, they're kind of in between a creative agency and like a media agency. But they realized at some point that they needed to rebuild their entire agency with AI. So they understood that the traditional model with marketing and advertising agencies, it doesn't work anymore. Like maybe today you still get away with it, but invoicing hours, like all of that, it's going to be something from the past really quickly now. And they realized that early on. So they decided to make that investment and they actually lost quite a lot of clients in that process because they changed the way they worked. And everything now is based on AI. Around that is still the team at the agency. So they're kind of working with the AI, they're feeding the AI, they're processing what comes out of it. So they're actually pretty advanced already, like in that system that helps them produce content and everything that they do. But he also said, like, yeah, in the end, it's the people using the AI and not fully automating things with just AI. You still need those people to control it and to process what comes from the AI and to have the connection with the clients and all of that. So you don't want the AI to communicate with the client, like you just mentioned, that's happening in your place. So it was an interesting conversation actually on the future of agencies. And it also challenged me or triggered me to challenge myself. Like, could we rebuild what we're doing at Nexxt Industry with AI? Could AI completely take over? Or if not, like what's going to be the human part of that system that we are using to create content, to create strategies, to build those marketing foundations that we do? And it's really hard. Like I'm trying and testing a few things, but it's always, you have these people on LinkedIn, for example, they would tell you, I built a media or a marketing agency with AI. No, you haven't. There are a lot of things missing. Yes, you might have a writer, but look at the content it's creating. You might have a designer using AI to come up with visuals, but it's crappy. Like it's not the quality that a professional agency would create and that our clients are expecting. I haven't found the exact way yet. And maybe, like we talked about, in a year or a couple of years from now, it will be completely different. But right now, it's just very mediocre and there are always things missing, and you really need that human layer. And that's also how I look at it, and how I enjoy building this together with you and the rest of our team, is that, what can AI do for us? Where's the value? How can we properly use it? And then we have the human layer to use the AI as an assistant, not have things fully automated, because it's simply impossible to get the right quality. And maybe some of our listeners might challenge us on this, but that's really my opinion at this moment. Like it's just not there yet to fully automate things and to actually have a marketing agency in the AI. Like it's some parts of it, yes, we're also using that, but a lot of it is missing, and you really need that human layer, in my opinion.
Yeah, 100%. It was, you need it. You can let AI do the heavy lifting, but still need to do the thinking, and we need the poetry and the soul behind it. And that you're talking about design, apparently my friends in one of my WhatsApp groups have been talking about the new ChatGPT image generator and how amazing it is. I've been sharing some images. I think it just came out this week or last week.
Yeah, I think it was yesterday even.
Yeah, maybe it was yesterday because they were talking about it yesterday.
Yeah.
I must admit, some of the images was like, wow, that is pretty amazing. But this is the weird thing. We're now saturated with these images. Like if you remember when we were kids, a cool image was something like to be sort of marveled at. I'm like, wow, look at that. Now there's everywhere. And so it doesn't have as much impact because now anyone can create a great image. So now it has to be like, but is it a clever image? Is it actually, what's it saying? What's the story behind it? Because anyone can, like you say, just put a prompt in and get a beautiful image. And it's like, I feel like that about the movies now. Do you? I remember like when people used to talk about a movie and say like had great special effects, but now it's like, no one says that because who cares? Every movie's got great special effects.
Yeah, exactly.
So the story needs to be better. So ironically, in a way, what it's doing is it means that the actual product, the soul of it, has to be better now than it ever did before, maybe, because you can't just rely on, there's maybe great sci-fi movies in the past that might be hits because they look so awesome. But now, like, that doesn't even move the needle with people, really. It has to be a great story. Otherwise, who cares,
It's like that, Barry, because if I look at Netflix, for example, if I'm like, we sometimes on a Friday or a Saturday, you think, okay, let's find a nice movie on Netflix, and 9 out of 10 times when you're watching it, you feel like, mwah. It's okay, it's Friday night, great, we'll have a wine and we'll watch the movie, but it's not that cool anymore. And there's a lot of, it's basically the same with writing that we discussed. It feels to me that there's a lot of mediocre content out there as well. And maybe it's like you said, the actual story is not done by humans anymore, or not that big part of the story is done by humans anymore, because I'm sure they're using AI for a lot of things in producing those movies. So you can really feel that. It really feels like, yeah, this is not that cool movie that we had like years ago. This is kind of, we need more content. People want to watch. So Netflix needs more content, and let's create some for the cheapest price that we can get it. And you really feel that.
Oh, and it's too much, right? When I see one of these movies now, the animation movie, like I loved the old ones, like Toy Story when it came out. That was a real groundbreaking visual feast. It was wonderful. But now when you watch them, there's too much on the screen. There's too much going on, right? I mean, I wonder about kids watching these things now. It's like there has to be a really insane visual all the time. It's overkill. It's too much, But when it costs money to make something visually amazing, or it took effort and time, it was more special when you saw it. And
That's
now,
true.
And it's the same for writing, like you say, like it's happened so fast, but there's so much more copy out there. Like every company now has posts all the time on LinkedIn and Facebook or whatever. Before they didn't used to have that. Some companies didn't even used to post at all because they didn't even have copywriters, or they just, they weren't doing that kind of thing. And now everybody has it. And so it's like coming back to what we said before. Is it going to jump off the page at you? Is it going to make you? Is it going to make you interested? It's a lot of the stuff you're just going to scroll past. It needs something different,
Absolutely.
and that's one of the positive things we can take from AI. In a way, it's made us up our game, because now you got to be better than ever. You can't just be mediocre anymore. It doesn't, because the baseline has gone up. Everything's well written now. Everything's well structured. Everything's grammatically correct. But, is it sexy? Is it interesting? Is it like, oh, wow, that is the most important thing now. So
Yeah, it's also an opportunity, right? If you know it's like that, so when you bring in a human copywriter, you'll get that extra touch, that sexy piece of content that stands out, and people will actually start reading. I also believe there's a huge opportunity with all these companies using AI. If you're doing it differently and work with a human copywriter, you'll stand out, and you'll see the difference, right? That's
it's a really good point. It's quite inspiring, actually, for you to
yeah.
say. It makes me think, right, okay, I'm going to make sure everything I do now does have that. And I do that.
Give it that extra touch, indeed.
Yeah, but let's face it, if you're writing something like a press release, right? Press releases are quite mundane and flat. They don't really, by nature, have much emotion in them. So, that's the kind of thing where it can feel a bit boring. But when you're doing something like a brand story, or a post on Meta or on LinkedIn or whatever, that's when you need to be interesting and different. And yeah, it's inspiring having this conversation, because it makes me realize, like, let's make sure everything we're doing has that little sprinkle of magic.
Yeah. Well, actually, Barry, I believe it already has. I mean, it's great to have that in mind, but already like being like that involvement with a human team, like if, for example, with a brand story, and like AI can write things for you, but it all looks the same, and you feel like, okay, wow, if we do it with that human touch, it's going to stand out. It's going to be cool. It's going to be something that you're proud of, to tell people like, hey, this is my company. This is what we do. This is why we do it. AI can create that for you, but it's not that, it misses that human touch. I truly believe in that. And by having that, it already stands out. And even if you have that in mind, that you want to make it even better and more cool and all of that, that's great. But already by that human involvement, it already makes it better, and it already stands out. That's what I truly believe. And you can see that happening at the moment in the market.
Oh yeah, 100%. People are just on the lookout for it all the time now. Like, I hear people say it all the time. There was an article produced. I'm a member of a England Football Association supporters club, and they put out an email the other day, a really long email, and one of my friends was just like, "That's just AI nonsense."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Even though it was just an email, and they used to be. The thing is, the reason he said that was because the England Football Association supporters club, they used to send out quite funny stuff. It used to kind of like just make jokes about what happened at the last game, and we used to quite enjoy getting them. And that's the thing now, it's like, if you write one boring generic AI post, when your readers see your next post, they're not going to read it. But if you write one that's like the ones we did for Clover, for example, you read one, and if it makes you laugh and it makes you think, oh, they sound quite funny, the next one, when you see it, there's a little part of your brain that goes, oh, good, it's them again.
There's another one. Yeah.
Really funny.
Yeah.
And, it's so then you're building up that kind of rapport, and you're building up that reputation of like, these guys are funny and interesting. I like their posts. I like, and that's huge. That's getting people to stop scrolling and actually look at your posts. If you're writing the clearly AI generated stuff, no one's going to stop at your post. So it's it's huge. It's more important than ever to make sure that you're standing out. So that's quite exciting. That.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I fully agree. There is another side to it. Like this just comes to mind. Like there's a guy in the eMobility space. I don't remember his name, but it's an older guy who's using AI to create posts on LinkedIn. But they're full of emojis and they're structured wrong, and it's actually hard to read because of all the emojis and everything that's in there. And once I replied to one of his messages saying like, "Hey, lose the AI, just write what you think. And then, yeah, so we got into a conversation, but he was really stubborn, like, yeah, but it's helping me create a post. But that also gets you attention. If you do it terribly wrong, that also gets you attention. Maybe it's the wrong kind of attention, because I also spoke to someone else who said, yeah, I know him because that's what he's doing all the time. It looks ridiculous. So people do remember. So maybe there's an opportunity the other way around as well, but it's not that professional.
Yeah, I suppose if you go to the extreme, then you're going to get noticed. There's a weird
Yeah,
little trend
exactly.
on social media where people deliberately put mistakes in their posts so that people comment on it saying, you've made a mistake. They do it deliberately, so then they're getting engagement. It's kind of a weird engagement, but I guess
Yeah,
it gets you
it
up on
does
that.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So Barry, like like my final question to you would be like, do you think that the best copywriters of the future will be writers, or will they be strategists who happen to write?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I think kind of both, really. I think you'll have to be a good strategist because, otherwise you're not going to be making good decisions, but you need to still have the writing skill to be able to make sure it has conviction, to make sure it speaks to people. So I think it's a bit of both. I don't think it changes the role of you have to have a good creative imagination. You have to understand what appeals to potential buyers. You have to be able to take a company and be able to sell their brand and make it interesting, put it out there. One of the things that like in our industry is some of the companies, some of their products might be quite technical, and if it's explained in a flat, boring way, people are not going to buy into it. I think maybe AI can do that, can kind of humanize the content and make it more palatable. But yeah, I think you're still going to have to, as we've discussed already, you're still going to have to be able to make it interesting and fun. And at the moment, AI can't do that, but who knows? It's very difficult to predict the future, you know?
Yeah. I would say let's bring the fun back in writing by making sure that we always have a human involved in creating content.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree, and that's what we need, and that's what we want to read. I want to keep writing great stuff, and I want to keep reading it too. Because don't forget, I'm not just a writer; I'm a reader as well. So, I want to be entertained, and in the same way everyone else does, I want something different. And when I see a company that's doing something a bit different and something that's interesting, I'm there, I'm engaged, and so I'm sure that's the same for everyone.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Use AI for research, use it for speed, use it for helping you with ideas when you're stuck, but keep humans in control of the strategy, the emotion, and the final voice. Like it's a hybrid approach, That's how you crack it with AI is both. Use AI for its strengths, but it can never replace the human brain and the human heart and soul.
I think that's the perfect advice and takeaway from our conversation today, Barry. So thanks for being here. I really enjoyed talking about writing and AI, and I'm very happy that you're on our team and we're making a difference this way. So I hope for our audience that you picked up a thing or two about writing in the age of AI and why that human touch is so important, and also the opportunity that it brings. So you can actually make a difference by having a human involved and bringing a bit more fun into the content that you're creating, because that will stand out in the age where a lot of companies are using AI to create generic content. So let's leave it with that, Barry. Thanks for being here today. I really enjoyed our conversation. And for our audience, see you next time on the eMobility Marketing Podcast.
Thanks, Theo.